In the aftermath of the horrific events that happened in Connecticut on December 14th, many of our left-leaning friends have once again, as they tend to do so often, started their mouths without engaging their brains. They have fallen right in step with the left-wing agenda, which is to place blame not on the deranged psychopath that was bent upon murdering the most innocent among us, but on the inanimate tools he chose for his destructive rampage. While this was an emotional, disturbing, and saddening occurrence, the knee-jerk irresponsible reaction is just as disturbing and saddening. People are literally ready to blindly throw what is perhaps the most important freedom-protecting right that we have under the bus. That is the right to keep and bear arms. Now, there are those that will attempt to convince you that they just want reasonable restrictions and that we don't need what they incorrectly refer to as assault weapons. They are, as usual, missing the point. The right to keep and bear arms is not about hunting or sport shooting. It is so that we can protect ourselves from tyranny, whether it is foreign, yes, but moreover, be it domestic as well. The Constitution for the United States of America is the law of the land, and since we are a nation of laws, then it should be and must be followed. The Second Amendment of the Bill of Rights, which defines our right to keep and bear arms, does indeed include assault weapons. Now, of course, the left will try to tell you that they were only talking about muskets and not today's weaponry because, after all, how could they know what type of weapons we would have? Well, this notion is completely false. Muskets were the modern-day weapons of the day, and the Founding Fathers intended for the people to be as equally armed as the government and the armies. They knew that if we only possessed inferior weaponry, then we would not be able to defend against the aforementioned tyranny. They were also what I believe to be inspired visionaries, and they knew that as time went on, the technology and weaponry would advance and that the people must continue to be equally armed. That is why there is no mention of any kind of restriction on what type of weapons the people could possess. Much like there is no mention of restrictions on the type of speech you have the freedom to. After all, there's no way they could have envisioned radio, television, or the internet, right? During World War II, Admiral Yamamoto told the Emperor of Japan that there was no way that he could invade the U.S. because he feared there would be a gun behind every blade of grass. That deterrence against such an invasion is why there has never been an attempt to massively invade the United States. It has been and still is an enormous deterrent, and placing a ban on assault weapons and taking them out of the hands of law-abiding people will only weaken our ability to maintain that deterrence. And the fact is that there has been a ban on assault weapons since 1986. You may ask, how can that be when you see them in Walmart every day? Well, it's simple. You don't see them in Walmart. AR-15s and AK-47 variants and other rifles and shotguns with pistol grips and magazines are not assault weapons. They are only semi-automatic firearms. Assault weapons are by definition weapons that have a selective rate of fire, meaning that they can go into rapid burst or fully automatic modes. The left has labeled these semi-automatic versions as assault weapons in an attempt to induce fear of these scary black rifles on unknowing individuals so that they can advance their narrative. That narrative was being pushed earlier this week when President Obama spoke to the community of Newton, Connecticut, and implied that a political solution can be found to these mass shootings. He said that we can't tolerate this anymore and that these tragedies must end and that to do so we must change. He also said that we are left with some hard questions. Well, I read a newsletter that I thought that the author in that newsletter addressed that implication quite effectively. He cited that a study done by Syracuse University showed that gun prosecutions in the United States peaked under President George W. Bush, and since then that the focus has steadily moved away from enforcing gun laws. In fact, the Washington Examiner reported that gun prosecutions under President Obama are down close to 50%. The author of that letter also had a hard question. We have laws on the books now forbidding murder and prohibiting unauthorized use of firearms. What makes these liberal politicians think that a new set of laws will solve the problem, especially when enforcing the current laws are obviously not a priority? Well, I have an answer to that. And that answer is that if the current laws are enforced, there is a high probability, and I think likely, that these mass shootings may not occur quite as frequently as they do. That would certainly not be in line with their agenda, which is to disarm the American citizenry. I read a post earlier this week where a gentleman said that more firearms equal more gun violence and more gun crime. He said it was a fact. Well, that statement gives credence once again to one of the quotes that the great Ronald Reagan once left us with. It's not so much that our liberal friends are ignorant, it's just that they know so much that simply is not so. Folks, there's the most concentrated assault on our Second Amendment rights in my lifetime going on right now. I urge everyone not to succumb to the fear-mongering from those that would take those rights from you. And we'll talk to you later.